Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We are here today to talk about a favourite art genre of mine, one that I have spent many years studying, researching and admiring, but it's also one that I feel is often misunderstood and misused and misapplied in video games. I am talking about surrealism. This video was inspired by Fight Crab. I have been playing a lot of Fight Crab recently. It is a brilliant game. It has just released on Nintendo Switch, and you can check out my review on digitallydownloaded.net for much more information on it and an analysis of the game itself. The point is, though, it is a work of true surrealism, and in playing it and admiring it for its surrealism, I was reminded that in many cases, when people talk about a game being surreal, what they mean is that it is weird or quirky or different or funny, and well, that's not really what surrealism means at all. A lot of the time a surrealist artwork can be those things, but the actual definition of surrealism and what it means and what the art movement was about is a lot more deep and complex than that. People often associate surrealism with the quirky antics of Salvador Dali, and he's become kind of the poster boy for surrealism. People, when they think of Dali, they think of surrealism, and when they think of surrealism, they think of Dali. And he was indeed both a surrealist and a very strange person, but there was method to his madness, and the thinking behind the surrealist art movement is actually much deeper than is commonly thought about today, in popular culture anyway. Surrealism was founded by a fellow by the name of André Breton. He was a poet, and it was a response to what the surrealists, such as Breton and Dali, believe had become the oppressive boundaries of rationalism. The ideas of reason and individualism that had become so much in vogue through the Enlightenment was something that the surrealists wanted to push back against, and the art movement is very broadly designed to do that. It is about pushing back against these Enlightenment ideas. How they did that was to dive into the unconscious mind and get very Freudian. Surrealists love to juxtapose the reality and the imagination, fact and fantasy, as a way of stripping meaning out of reality itself and underpinning the fundamental absurdity of it all. Now, I don't mean absurdity as in absurdism, which is a different art movement and another talk for another day. I mean the dictionary definition of absurdity. That's what the surrealists were aiming for. It's also worth noting that surrealism was an aggressively Marxist philosophy, and the surrealists believed in the revolutionary power of art to liberate the minds of the masses from what they saw as the rational order of society and what they believed the arts had formed around pushing that rational order of society. As Salvador Dali himself was once quoted as saying, "Surrealism is destructive, but it destroys only what it considers to be the shackles limiting our vision." So if you are interested in learning more about surrealism, you want to check out Breton and Dali, of course, but there are also the writer Georges Bataille and playwright Antonin Artaud. Those are probably my top 4 surrealists for really understanding the artistic movement and what it was aiming at. It is an art movement that formally wound up at the end of the Second World War. The surrealists that were still around at that time believed that the movement had done its time and moved on. But it did have a profound impact on the arts, and it continues to inspire to this day. People love surrealism to this very day. And in fact, Dali, who was a bit of a joker back in those days, and he was a little bit difficult, I guess, for the artistic world to take seriously, has been reassessed as being somebody worth taking very seriously in the years since, in the modern time. However, it has also become a movement that people have come to attribute with the aesthetic, for the idea of it being weird for the sake of weird, without necessarily the meaning behind it, and this is to greatly misunderstand it. A much closer parallel to surrealism in our times than weird to be the sake of weird would be to look at punk art or an artist like Banksy. These are creators that dismiss realism for a kind of vivid otherworldliness, and artists that challenge the structural and thematic conventions of the form. That would be much closer to what a surrealist would look like in 2020 than a guy that just does weird things for the sake of being quirky. The thing that the video game medium could be very good at doing is exploring surrealism as an art form. The interactive nature of video games lends themselves to that very dreamlike state that the absurdists aim for. And the moving image and interactivity of the medium of video games allows for that juxtaposition of the rational and irrational in very dynamic, creative and interesting ways. The problem is that video games are also very steadfastly rules-based, and it's to a degree that really eclipses other art forms. The deliberate breaking of those rules that make a good video game tends to lead audiences to believe that the decisions are a non-deliberate consequence of the game being bad. There's a binary there in video games where it's either done to best practice design and is therefore good, or if it challenges that good, it is therefore bad. Fight Crab here is a really good example. Fight Crab doesn't play well in the conventional sense of what you would expect from a well-playing game. It is slow and clunky by design, and while it works very well within its own eternal rule sets and structures, if you look at it in comparison to other brawlers and fighters, it is a very, very different experience. And you can see in plenty of other reviews that this has been chalked up as clumsy and average execution, typical terms that get thrown around to describe a game that doesn't meet the best practice approach of good game design. So to those critics, it doesn't matter what the game was or what it was saying, it has been judged as an inferior example of a video game in comparison to those games that do follow the rules of the brawler or fighter genre much more thoroughly. Now, I don't mean to say that those perspectives are incorrect, especially if you're looking at video games as an entertainment medium and you just want to play an enjoyable video game, then you want the game to conform to game design best practices. But for a game to be surrealist, it almost mandates the kind of response that those critics are going to have. At least some of them. Some people will get a surrealist game, people like myself that actually really enjoy that challenge to convention and the way that games are designed. Those are the people that tend to really enjoy surrealist games, whereas the mainstream, I guess, will find them a little bit too cumbersome to overcome. And that's why you have games, the surrealist games tend to be very polarizing in terms of the critical response that they get. A really good example of that is Deadly Premonition 2, which came out a couple of weeks ago and was the sequel to an infamously polarizing original. The sequel managed to be every bit as polarizing. Now, according to the game's own logic and design, Deadly Premonition 2 is very consistent and deliberate. Even the frame rate issues that the game had were consistent within the context of the game, that it was built around having those frame rate issues. And in fact, the game's creator, Swery, was out there making fun of the kind of the good game design elements that were expected of a video game, knowing full well that Deadly Premonition 2 would get criticized from some corners of the media. Now, according to those reviews, it was an inferior game because it didn't do horror or thriller as well as its more standard compatriots. Another good example, yet again, is Pathologic 2, which is downright Artodian in its magnificence, but structurally broke with convention so much that you needed to be a very, very specific frame of mind to enjoy it. Surrealism, if it's going to work, it can't just be an aesthetic. They need to go all in with it. If Fight Crab was just a surrealistic aesthetic, it would be tiring and quickly. Fight Crab is such a great bit of surrealism because the surrealism informs the entire game, and right down to its core mechanics, it challenges expectations about how games should work. That's ultimately where it finds its weird humor as well. By being so different, it has that eye-opening effect, and then it just kind of makes you giggle along with it. That's how it achieves it. That's how surrealism generally achieves its humor. It's in being so off-putting, you end up being internally reflective and then laughing along with what it's saying and doing. Anyway, that's enough of a video. Please do go and check out more about surrealism if it's interesting. It is a fascinating art movement, and the more you learn about it, the more you learn to enjoy surrealist artworks for being different, and why that difference is something that we should value within the arts. Please do click the like and subscribe button if you enjoy my videos as always, and please do consider backing me on Patreon Even $1 a month does help me to continue to grow this channel and do more videos like this. Thanks as always for watching. We'll see you next time.